The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it colonizes. It's a relentless, gray weight that turns the evergreen trees into hunched shadows and makes the pavement of Oak Creek Drive slick enough to reflect every mistake you've ever made. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. In our neighborhood, Tuesday nights are usually soundtracked by the hum of dishwashers and the distant glow of televisions through half-drawn curtains. But inside my house, the silence was different. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air in a room just before a fire breaks out. I sat in the oversized leather armchair in the living room, the one Sarah bought for my 35th birthday, because she said I looked distinguished in it. Now I just felt small. I was swirling a glass of lukewarm bourbon, the ice long since melted into a watery amber. I was waiting for her. She had been working late shifts at the University Heights Clinic for 3 months. At first I believed her. I wanted to. I clung to the logic of a man who didn't want his world to end. But the clinic closed at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays. I'd driven by twice. The parking lot was always a desert of empty asphalt. The headlights finally cut through the darkness, two sharp white eyes slicing through the rain. My heart did a slow, painful roll in my chest, but as the vehicle turned into the driveway, I realized the engine note was wrong. Sarah drove a humming, sensible SUV. This was the low, aggressive growl of a precision-engineered German engine. A sleek black sedan pulled in, idling with a predatory vibration that I could feel in the floorboards. A man stepped out. He didn't hesitate. He didn't check the house number. Oh, he moved with the terrifying confidence of someone who had been here before, perhaps when I wasn't home. He was tall, dressed in a tailored charcoal overcoat that looked like it cost more than my first car. He didn't knock. He turned the handle, Sarah must have left it unlocked, and walked into my foyer like he was returning to his own estate. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. He stood there for a moment, dripping rainwater onto the hand-scraped hickory floors Sarah had picked out 3 summers ago. He didn't look like a common intruder. He didn't look like a villain from a movie. He looked like a man who had already won a war I didn't even know I was fighting. He slowly unbuttoned his coat, revealing a dark suit underneath, and scanned the room. His eyes lingered on our wedding photos on the mantel, the one of us in Maui laughing into the wind, and a small twisted smirk of pure pity touched his lips. "Who the hell are you?" I asked. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like they were made of sand. My voice cracked, a high-pitched betrayal of my own fear that I hated the second it left my throat. The man didn't flinch. He didn't even look startled to see me sitting there in the dark. He looked at me the way an apex predator looks at a scavenger, not with anger, but with total indifference. "My name is Julian," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that belongs in a boardroom or a high-end funeral home. "And I think you know exactly why I'm here, Mark. Or at least, how the part of you that's been lying to yourself for the last 6 months knows." The bourbon in my glass felt like lead. My mind raced through 1,000 excuses, 1,000 maybes, but they all died in the face of his certainty. This was the reason for the late nights. The reason her phone was always face down on the nightstand. The reason she stopped calling me babe and started calling me Mark. "Get out," I managed to say, finally finding my feet. I stepped into the light of the foyer, trying to summon some ghost of the man I used to be. "Get out of my house before I call the police." Julian didn't move. He actually chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "The police? For what? A guest? Sarah invited me, Mark. In fact, she's been inviting me into your life for a very long time." The audacity of it was a physical blow, a literal hand against my chest. Here in the house we built together, a stranger was claiming territory. He walked past me into the kitchen, helping himself to a glass from the cupboard, my cupboard, and filling it with water from the tap. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be," Julian said, leaning against the granite island. "I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to facilitate a transition. Sarah is upstairs right now. She's packing the last of what matters to her. The rest of this stuff, you can keep. The house, the furniture, the memories. We don't want them." He took a slow sip of water, His eyes locked on mine. She's leaving with me tonight, and you have to deal with it. No scenes, no desperate pleas. Just let her walk out with her dignity. And I'll ensure this stays as civil as possible. My blood was roaring in my ears now, a deafening tide. My wife, my Sarah, the woman I'd shared a bed with for a decade, was upstairs packing a life into a suitcase while I sat downstairs like a stranger in my own home. If you were in my shoes facing a man who had invaded your home to take your spouse, what would you do? Would you fight or would the shock paralyze you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Just as the words began to form in my mouth, a scream, a protest, a demand for the truth, I heard the floorboards creak above us. It was a familiar sound. I knew exactly which board it was, the one near the master closet that I'd promised to fix for 3 years. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs. She wasn't wearing her scrubs. She was wearing a trench coat and boots, clutching a designer suitcase I didn't recognize. Her face wasn't filled with the guilt I expected. There were no tears, no trembling lips. Instead, her expression was one of terrifying, icy resolve. She looked at Julian first, a brief, silent communication passing between them that made my stomach turn. Then finally she looked at me. "Is this true?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain drumming on the roof. "Sarah, please, just tell me this is some kind of sick joke. Tell me he's lying." "Mark, stop," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the warmth that had been the heartbeat of my world. "We've been dead for years. We were just two people sharing a zip code and a tax return. Julian offers me a life you couldn't even imagine. He sees me. He actually sees me." "I saw you," I yelled, the glass in my hand shattering as I slammed it onto the side table. "I saw you every single day. I supported you. I loved you." The silence that followed Sarah's declaration was louder than the storm outside. I stood there watching Julian's hand rest on the small of her back. It was a practiced movement, a gesture of ownership that felt like it had been rehearsed in hotel rooms and shadowed corners while I was at work. But as Julian shifted his weight to take Sarah's heavy suitcase, his charcoal overcoat flared open. I saw a thick manila folder with an embossed gold seal. I recognized that seal. It belonged to the Greyson estate, my grandfather's firm. My grief didn't vanish, but it was suddenly crowded by a cold, sharp spike of suspicion. Why would Julian be carrying my family's private estate papers? This wasn't just a romance. Julian saw me looking. He didn't panic. He simply adjusted the coat, his eyes narrowing into two icy slits. He looked at Sarah, then back at me, a smirk playing on his lips that said he knew exactly what I was thinking, and he didn't care. "The Greyson Trust," I said, my voice steadier now. "What is in that folder, Julian? And don't tell me it's travel itineraries." Sarah stiffened. I saw her hand tighten on the handle of her suitcase, her knuckles turning a ghostly white. "It's none of your business, Mark," she snapped. "Everything that belongs to the Greyson name is being settled. I'm a Greyson too, by marriage. I'm taking what's mine. Taking what's yours. That trust is protected. It's land and legacy." Julian stepped in front of her, his physical presence acting as a wall. "We're done talking about paperwork," Julian hissed. "Read the documents are signed, notarized, and filed. By the time the sun comes up, your family's holdings in the valley will have a new management firm, one that actually knows how to turn a profit." Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Do you think Sarah is being manipulated, or is she the one pulling the strings in this betrayal? "You're not taking anything from this house until we talk about this," I said. I felt a transformation happening inside me. The broken husband was receding, and the man who had been raised by a line of ruthless Oregon timbermen was taking his place. Julian laughed. "The wrong man? Mark, look at yourself. You're standing in a kitchen you haven't paid off, crying over a woman who has been sleeping in my bed for 6 months. You are the perfect man for this. You're soft. You're predictable." He turned to Sarah, ignoring me entirely. "Come on, we're going to miss the window at the private terminal." Sarah began to walk toward the door, her heels clicking rhythmically on the wood. Click, click, click. The sound of my life being dismantled in 4/4 time. I reached out to grab her arm, but Julian was faster. He caught my wrist in a grip like a steel vise. "Don't," he whispered. "If you touch her, I will end you right here on this hickory floor, and then I'll take the land anyway." Julian shoved my arm back, sending me stumbling into the kitchen island. He picked up Sarah's suitcase and guided her out the front door. The rain was coming down in sheets now. I watched them walk to the sedan. Julian opened the passenger door for her with a mocking bow. Before she got in, Sarah paused. She didn't look back with regret. Her eyes were as cold as the Pacific. As they pulled out of the driveway, the red taillights looked like two bleeding eyes fading into the mist. In less than 20 minutes, my marriage had ended and a multi-million-dollar theft had been executed. I went back inside and closed the door. The house was too quiet. I walked to our small home office and looked at the wall-mounted safe. The painting was crooked. I pulled it aside. The safe was hanging open, its digital face dark. The original land deeds, the power of attorney forms, and the emergency cash, all gone. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated strike. This was a game of family secrets and revenge. I slumped into the desk chair, my hands trembling as I pulled up my laptop. And I logged into our joint brokerage account. Balance $0. I checked the Greyson Family Trust portal. The primary land deeds for 3,000 acres of prime timberland in the Willamette Valley were flagged. A notice of transfer had been uploaded. The signature was Sarah's. But next to it, as the representative of the new holding company, was a name that made the room tilt. Julian Vane. Vane. The name felt like a ghost stepping out of a dark corner. I closed my eyes and suddenly I was 10 years old again, listening to my father argue with a man named Elias Vane. It had been a brutal corporate takeover. This wasn't just a betrayal of a husband. This was a blood feud. I didn't call the police. My father always told me that when you involve the law in family business, you lose control of the narrative. Besides, on paper, it looked like a legal transfer. I grabbed my keys and my heavy canvas coat. 2 years ago, I'd set up a family sharing plan on our phones. I opened the Find My app. A small green dot was pulsing. They weren't at the airport yet. They were moving south on I-5, currently passing through Tacoma. They were heading toward Portland, back to the scene of the original crime. I pushed my truck to 80, weaving through late-night freight trucks. Every mile felt like a minute closer to losing my legacy. I pulled over onto the shoulder for 30 seconds and flipped through a leather-bound journal my father had given me on his deathbed. There, pinned to the back cover, was a photograph from 2004. It was my father standing in front of the Vane sawmill. Standing in the shadows was a teenage boy with cold, calculating eyes. It was Julian. He hadn't found Sarah by accident. He had hunted her. He had studied my life and crawled inside it like a parasite. And Sarah? Was she a victim, or was her resentment for me so large that she was willing to burn the whole world down? Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you found out your spouse's new lover was actually the son of your family's oldest enemy, would you turn the car around or keep driving into the trap? I pulled into the Nisqually rest area 5 minutes later. The black sedan was parked in the far corner. I saw them through the glass. They were arguing. Julian was shaking the folder in her face. It didn't look like the life she couldn't imagine. I had the digital login to the Greyson server. I could delete the transfer, but it would trigger a fraud alert that would send Sarah to prison for 20 years. If I saved the land, I destroyed the woman I once loved. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Is Sarah worth saving, or did she lose that right the second she opened the safe? I walked toward the black sedan and slammed my fist against the glass. Julian spun around, his face contorting into a mask of pure shock. He scrambled to roll down the window, his hand disappearing into the center console. "Get your hand off the gun, Julian," I said, "unless you want the Washington State Patrol to find you standing over my body with forged deeds. Think about the optics." He froze. "You're persistent, Mark, but you're too late. The land belongs to Vane Holdings now." "I'm the ghost who has the admin password to the server," I countered. I held up my phone. One tap, and I flag that transfer as a fraudulent breach. The feds will be at your hotel before breakfast." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. "Mark, just go home. Julian said if we did this, we could start fresh." "He promised you a lie, Sarah. Did he tell you who he really was? He didn't pick you because of your smile, but because of your last name. He's the son of the man who tried to ruin my family 20 years ago. You're just the key to the vault. Once he has the land, he'll drop you at the first Greyhound station." I leaned closer. "Tell her about the limited liability clause you slipped into the papers, Julian. The one that puts 100% of the legal responsibility on her, in while the assets go to a trust you control." The silence was deafening. Sarah turned to Julian. "Julian? Is that true?" Julian didn't answer. He looked away, his jaw tightening. The betrayal had come full circle. "You bastard," she whispered. She reached for the folder, but Julian grabbed her wrist. "Sit down, Sarah. Mark, get away from the car, or I swear to God I'll drive over you." I didn't move. I tapped the flag for fraud button and held the screen up. "Here's how this goes. Julian, you give her the folder. You get out of this car, and you walk toward the highway. If I ever see your face again, I'll release the evidence of the Denver fraud you committed 3 years ago." Julian calculated the risks. He opened his door, stepped out into the mud, and began walking. He didn't look back. I looked at Sarah. "And Sarah, now you give me the folder. You get in the truck. We're going to go back to the house and we're going to call a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer, a criminal one." The drive back to Seattle was the quietest 3 hours of my life. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, shivering. The manila folder sat on the dashboard, a paper tombstone. "Mark," she whispered, "he told me you wouldn't even notice. The future doesn't exist without a foundation, Sarah, and you traded ours for a pack of lies." We pulled into the driveway as a purple dawn began to bleed through the clouds. The house wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was just a building made of wood and glass. I watched her walk up to the guest room. I sat in that same leather armchair, realizing that while I had saved the land, I had lost the home. But in the world of family secrets and revenge, sometimes holding on to your name is the only victory you get. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. This story is a reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most carry secrets that can dismantle our world in a single night. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments below. Was I right to take Sarah back to the house, or should I have left her in that parking lot? If you appreciate these deep dives into loyalty and legacy, please give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and join our community here at Family Secrets and Revenge. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your secrets closer.